especially here I'm in the United States, here in Connecticut, very lucky to be one of our states that are leading the nation for getting people vaccinated. It's not the same when we look at Africa. We look at other countries, and the book that Peters, that Craig has it, and Jill, the book that you're talking about, you guys are looking at, a lot of these injustices that have occurred. And I can remember a book I was asked to read back in 7th grade called Kaffir Boy, that looked at the struggles of South Africans and what they were going through. And it was very, very much a very much graphic book for a child to read at that age, but it really showed the injustices between the struggle between people of color and the dominant white race that led that country at the time. And what you've seen is in Africa, there still continues to be a huge injustice, even to this day, around HIV, AIDS, and around the current pandemic and what's being rolled out. To date, their goal at the end of this year, 2021, is to, under the World Health Organization's guidance, is to vaccinate, if they're lucky, less than 20% of the population of Africa, right? Now, if you think about it as a country as a whole, that is a huge, underservice. And if you think about a school like mine, where we have students that come from Nigeria, we have students that come from other areas that come take our public health programs, our master's health program, where we look at global health, global leadership. Having people coming to other countries, the United States, the European Union has dominated and monopolized the vaccines that are being developed in this country, that are being developed worldwide, actually. Under the previous administration in the United States, we failed to support the World Health Organization in securing vaccines for countries in Africa and all other countries around the world. They can't afford to buy vaccines, okay? When we look at medications for HIV/AIDS, we look at medications, other medications that are prescribed, a lot of my students sometimes struggle with, why is a medication that sells for thousands of dollars here, treatment that sells for thousands of dollars here in the United States, sold sometimes for a couple of dollars in some of these countries in Africa. And again, you have to look at what that country is struggling with. If you look at our news, what do we see on the news? We don't see the struggles going on that to this day in Africa, unless it's attacking one of our interests for the United States. So we have to really be mindful of that. If we want this pandemic, it's a pandemic for a reason. We're not working across global borders. We're not communicating. We're not securing the health and safety of the world. We're putting our own interests first. So if you think about it, again, the World Health Organization's goal is to have 60% of the coverage of Africans by June of 2022. So over a year from now, not a little over half their vaccination rate should be vaccinated. The struggle they will have there is the same struggle we see here in America, sometimes with people of color. They have been mistreated, misguided, misled by institutions, by their governments, historically. We have seen that here with people of color, especially if you go down to the South regions. You'll see that with the syphilis experiments that happened, that ended in the late 1970s, okay? So you think about what these experiments going on, people still to this day have that mindset that they don't trust the healthcare system. They don't trust our government here in the United States. When you talk to people that come from African countries, they will say the same thing. They will not hear, or they are mistold. They are told that HIV/AIDS is not real, it's a myth. Using condoms or using contraception or using antivirals is also a myth. It's against the religions, it's against beliefs. And this is coming from their government. It's not coming from me or someone else. It's actually coming from the government sometimes. So as we look at it, the United States already has 40% of at least one dose administered to their population. The United States, to this date, has more doses secured now that they can vaccinate the US population twice. Not once, but twice. It's just now that we are finally starting, again, we have a change in administration that happened in January. The previous administration did not support these other allocating funds. Despite that, our US Congress did spend about $4 billion prior to the change in administration over to support these initiatives like COVAX. But currently, the Biden administration has now started to release the stockpile that we have amassed, because again, Americans are not either utilizing it or they're going to go to waste, so they sit there. So we really have to look at COVID. We have to look at COVID overall. Where are we as a country, and how do we want to really, if we're trying to protect our borders and protect our own interests, we have to protect the world. It's a global economy for a reason. It's a global world. What happens in one part of the world, and this is a great way of looking at it, that something that happens in one little remote village somewhere, if left unchecked, can take down the entire world. Doesn't matter how strong or how wealthy you are, a virus and illness does not see color. It does not see wealth. It does not see power. So there are people who thought they would isolate, and they were still getting infected. So we look at a lot of these different manipulations that are going on, the misguidance, stuff like that. It's pretty alarming that we have to think about how struggling these third world countries are struggling to just provide a basic need protection that people in established countries such as the European Union, here in the United States, that we take for granted. Okay, that we are looking at funding, we are looking at providing, I could walk down the street and get vaccinated now, where before it was a little bit of a struggle scheduling wise. These people may have to go miles and miles. There are people with healthcare that they wait for the clinics to come to their remote village, and they line up for hours on end. So, and they will wait in line sometimes for a day or two just to get basic medical care that we take for granted every day. So as we think about overall where we're at as a country going forward with the pandemic, luckily we're seeing it on a tail end. But again, we're seeing countries, India, for example, who has been devastated. Again, they have a caste system there. Talking to a student there whose family is very high up in the caste system that they have there, they were doctors, they knew people, they were able to get into a medical treatment when they contracted COVID, only because of the connections they had. Again, if you look at the everyday people in Africa, as you think about people in third world countries, they don't have that. They're lucky if they have a roof over their head. They're lucky if they can go to sleep and not have to worry about, as Craig mentioned, having drug lords come through, raid the village, and kidnap their children. Something that we take for granted here in the United States and Europe. So as we look at trying to have global economies to have better trade, to have better health, we have to look at securing and stabilizing, the world. We have to take a global effort, a global initiative, in order to help those countries and those people feel secure. As an occupational therapist, I talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and the fundamental belief from Maslow, going back and stands true to this day, is safety, security. If you don't feel secure in your own personal self, how can you move forward and how could you achieve greater outcomes? How can you look at health, of being healthy, making good decisions? You're on survival mode. You're on flight or fright at this point in time. You're not looking at the next biggest thing or trying to secure buying, working harder to buy a new TV in some of these countries because they don't have electricity. They don't have maybe in the town they're in. Other places though, they have medications that they have actually developed on their own, vaccines, and you have not heard it come to the United States. So some of these countries have manufactured their own vaccines, and no one here in the EU or the United States has heard of it because they quickly dismissed it based on the origin. They didn't look at it or where it would go. So I think as we look at forecasting going forward, we look at a lot of people saying, what is going on? What's going on with the pandemic? I love. I looked into it. I have not read, I have not read the book, but I read the synopsis of the book and the premise of the book around that there's there might be an underlying, they have a vaccines developed for a cure, and it sounds like, someone's going after trying to steal it or hide it. And I think about that, how many times do we see that coming forward from other countries we don't trust? We have to think that our country is number one. Or the U.S., there's a lot going on. There's several articles out there that, the United States has to step it up because China and Russia have been pumping out money and support for the third world countries trying to buy political power and influence. So as we think about power struggles and governments, we have to sort of put that down. It's not for the United States, it's not Democrat versus Republican. It's really what's greater for our country, but also what's greater for the world. What's going to make this pandemic end so we can open the borders up worldwide and get trade going again, get relief going to where it needs to go, and making sure that when we deliver vaccines to countries, and I've seen it with food relief going into Africa, the drug lord sees it and then controls it and hands it out. And there's no one stepping in saying, wait a minute, how could you just seize all this food from the World Health Organization or from another organization coming in to deliver the food? We just turn a blind eye to it. If that happened in a European country, that happened here in America somewhere, you would see a different reaction. You would see the military coming in to intervene. They would not let a drug lord riot group come in to take control. So I think we have to look again at these injustices that we allow to continue going on time and time again. And if we don't do that, we are not going to see a systemic, trying to say it politically correct, I think, but we will not see that, people, especially people of color, who in this country are delaying, getting the vaccine, don't trust getting the vaccine, but will allow them to at least trust the system, trust the experts, as they say, get vaccinated, where they have the opportunity to, so that we can get those other vaccines to countries that are in need to make sure this virus doesn't come back and nip us in the butt, to put it nicely. So thank you. From there, I'll stop right there and open up for any questions that you may have.
That was really vital information, Michael. I appreciate your comments and your input. Please, while I think if there are questions, prepare them to share with Michael, because we are probably the richest nation in the world, and we're have incredible resources, and it doesn't make any sense. And and it's an important time for us to discover how we can play a more vital role and some of the problems that plague communities around the world, as it were. And someone said that there's the day that you're born, and then there's the day you discover why you were born, is a second birth. When you really discover what can be done, what must be done. And there's no reason why, vital resources that we have in our storehouse that we present and share with other countries end up in the hands of people who don't get it to the people who need it the most. And that's not good. It shouldn't happen. So in that regard, questions for Michael, because he shares important information. Someone asked the question, I think Donna wanted to know, how do you feel about the vaccine passport?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I actually was just typing, but I'll say here, I think the vaccine passport, there's benefits to it, but when you look at other countries, especially if you're looking at if you look at, not looking at health, but just looking at global trade and commerce, business travel, if you have countries where you're going to, these third world countries that we rely on for production, for producing clothing, other parts. We look at people for education or coming out of Africa, especially some countries there, a lot of their students come here to the United States for education and then go back to try to strengthen the African continent. If you have a vaccine passport requiring to show proof of vaccination coming in, though it may try to help stop the spread, those people may not be able to come anymore. You're going to lose them to other countries or other people, especially if you're looking from a business standpoint, that may not be able to come here. So though it may be helpful, those people will also be a struggle, if you think about it, for getting those countries until they get vaccinated. So down the road, it may be something that we look at, but I think we've seen, and a great country to look at is New Zealand, where they've controlled they haven't used the vaccine, and they were able to nip it in the bud with the borders closed, with straight quarantining after 14 days. Their recent outbreaks came from people showing symptoms after 21 days. So again, this virus is ever changing. So again, that's where I think we have to look at from that standpoint. And and thinking about the question, follow up here, will COVID be with us? That's what they're thinking. It's here to stay. The viruses can naturally die off or continue to mutate, as we've seen with the UK virus, the South African virus, the variant, and the Brazil variant, sort of, and it affects people differently. So you can see it stick around for a little while. That's why it's important to get people vaccinated to stop it spreading, because each time it spreads, it has a chance to mutate. And that's where we don't know how effective the vaccines will be. I just heard from the United States government that the vaccines now are guaranteed to be effective for 6 months now. So when we first came out, they were supposed to be a year. Now they're 9 months. Now they are, 6 months, and then we're going to have to get a booster. So again, if you think about it, I watched the Prime Minister for New Zealand run for re-election, walking in crowds, no masks, no social distancing, all without vaccines administered in the country. They are now vaccinating people, but they did that just by simple wearing masks, social distancing, and they had a very, they are just starting to reopen their borders now to international travel, starting with Australia first. But unfortunately, that's what they had to do. It hurt their businesses, but they look at how they went about stuff. In other countries, Taiwan did the same. South Korea was another country that was successful for a long time. So we can do stuff. We could do things a little bit stronger and better, but I think we have a long way to go still from that whole global perspective. But if you do the right thing, you will see the money flow. The companies do the right thing, they'll see the money flow.
In the last seconds or so, Michael, and as we prepare to move to the next speaker, we have come through three major catastrophic elements and challenges in our community and culture. There was the COVID big deal, the cybersecurity issue, and there's still the financial and economic issues that we face as a country and a culture that way. I'm trying to indicate that we don't want to now expose ourselves, because America is an open country for the most part. And once the airlines and airports and travel facilities begin to open up, we will be an open country again. There are other countries who are not so open, which probably didn't have the issues of COVID to begin with. But the power of our country is the fact that we are open and we can travel from country to country. But that should not be a issue or a reason that we move into other catastrophic conditions and restrictions that way. So I just want to put that out there to see, how we could be more foresight, more forecasting to prevent against, in the case of, and we are fluid electronically. We have to think about how do we prevent and secure ourselves, absolutely personally, corporate wise, financially, and as a community. Any insights on that, if it makes sense to you? Michael, or anybody that wants to speak?
No, I think you raised some good points. I think just remember, as a country, we've been through a pandemic, over 100 years ago, the Spanish flu, as a world. And unfortunately, our government, one thing I teach in a class of mine is our government does not learn. Again, I'm not tying to political parties. It's just to the government as a whole. Having worked in the government, we don't learn sometimes, and we have advances in healthcare, and yet we're on the same timeline for treating a pandemic or stopping a pandemic, even with the borders open, that we see 100 years later. So you would think that, like you said, advances in technology, wealth, and advances in medicine, we should be able to control this a little bit quicker. But again, we let a virus, and if you think about cybersecurity, think about national security, a virus brought down the world, if you want to think about it. So it stopped the world. So I'll leave you guys with that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael.
And Michael, please stay as long as you can. I want to bring Ken Peters, because he's written the book. Yeah, and I'm so excited because this is a South African panel. And Ken, I have brought you the audience that you need for your book. And I want 1 or 2 minutes for Ken, because I don't want to lose him. Ken is a book coach, and he has been with our group for a very long time, and he's returning after a very long time. So Ken,
I promise I'll keep it brief. Michael, your comments are wonderful. Having been being an international economist, and I've lived in so many countries in all the continents, and of course my last out was in South Africa, and that's where the book came to me. The issue of cybersecurity is very, very important to the entire world. But as you pointed out, viruses, I spent my entire corporate career in biotechnology and healthcare. I worked a lot before I did the book with the National Institute of Virology in South Africa, and with Fauci, and with Richard Besser also. And aside from the thriller, the fact that there's Europeans that want to take the former colonials that want to take back Africa, and they find out that in this transgene company in Durban makes the vaccine, they recruit mercenaries thinking that they're just a commercial espionage to steal the vaccine. And in fact, they contaminate it so that Africans will die. But at the end of the day, we're in a very, as an international economist, we're global. I lived in Argentina, Venezuela, Colombia 2 times. I've lived in China. I've lived in Sweden. I've lived in various countries in Africa. The entire concept of what you were speaking of about governments getting a grip, and it's very difficult because this is not 2025 at Star Trek where we see a global world. Everyone is still quite nationalistic. We don't, and it's a tragedy. There's so much corruption. I remember we had a huge shipment of HIV tests that were sent to the DRC, and it was some venture capital company that bought these to make money on them. And I got a call from a consolidator saying, "This is sitting on the tarmac. What do we do with it?" I said, "You know, we're just I was with the corporate firm. We're the manufacturers. We can't move that to the villages or to the places that are needed." So it's a very complicated world. My book puts an exciting spin on what could be if someone could contaminate it. And that's one of the things about cybersecurity today that I was explaining earlier on, if anyone was here, that in making biologicals today, it is not much different than computers when it comes to manipulating things by code. And I have seen all sorts of variations, and speaking of variations, and to Michael pointing out about the variations in the vaccine, one of the simplest ways that was explained to me, again, I'm a PhD economist, I'm not a doctor, but I've had to listen for decades to doctors why they wanted money to approve this in the corporation, is that the way variants travel is, if you think about a videotape in the olden days, every time you make a copy, that copy is almost perfect, but it's slightly different. And every time the virus goes.
Ken, you got muted.
Anyway, depending on, I apologize, I don't know how that happened. But at any rate, depending on the genetics and genomics of the person that got the virus, even though the copy may be almost 99.9% identical, the copy will be a little bit different. And that keeps replicating itself as if we were making videotapes. So at any rate, I thank you, Michael. It was a great presentation. You know, I'm an international economist. I see globally, if we don't take care of these things, when I'm in lecturing on climate change and things like that in macro, one of the things that I've mentioned before, and this will be the last story, and I'll cede my time, is that a lot of the problems we have with immigration in Europe is a simple fact of climate change, that there are droughts, farms, that people can't earn a living. We're talking about the theory of people that if you don't feel secure, is it Maslow? Is that his name, Michael?
Maslow, yep.
Maslow, yeah. When you don't have security, you flight or fight. And when you look at Syria, most people do not realize, using that as a single example, that Syria had a drought in '92, and the farm people moved to the cities, and the tribes did not get along. Okay, hence the Yazidis and everyone else, and Bashar al-Assad didn't want these people there. So anyway, there are many things that are integrated, from cybersecurity to climate change, and of course we are a global community. And Michael mentioned that there's so much that I have when I did the economic the economic impact of immigration and climate change. You can't even imagine that while people think about T-shirts being made in Vietnam, Vietnam makes the cotton. The cotton goes to Colombia. Colombia makes the T-shirts. The integration is so intense globally that you cannot ignore viruses. You cannot ignore many things. We need to operate globally. I'll end by just saying my book is great. And if you want an adventure of an exciting thing, of a taut thriller, a vaccine, again, is compromised. And if those who are Americans might know the story of, I think it's Bevins was his name, who was the one accused at Fort Detrick of sending anthrax about, and the federal government went after him. So in that same vein, the fellow who is the protagonist of the book is a biotechnologist, and the federal government is actually, like many people, are in line with this vaccine being contaminated under the table, so that they get to take back Africa, its minerals and all of its wealth. And he's trying to scream from the rooftops, and everyone's trying to kill him. That's it. Okay. End of story. Thank you very much for your time.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Ken. I appreciate that. We're moving through with the need for time, and your comments, Michael, were outstanding, and Ken. And so, wow, there's a lot to think about. It's a powerful moment here, and I don't want us to miss it. I do want us to be fully conscious of it, but we need to think of how we proceed in a very litigious way, if you will. So I know there's a lot of people looking to get their presentations in, and so here's what we're going to do. I sent out the record. Michael and Ron, you're next. Jill, you're next after them, and then Ken will come forward. Ken Westberger to present. So and it's a powerful day, and there's much to be heard, and there is much from people. And Craig, you're after Ken. Is that okay? So good. You are incredible. You guys are incredible. Let's take a laugh break, if you don't mind. One of the things that I like to do from time to time, I think it's important that even in the height of intense and powerful content, we laugh. We laugh. Now, here's the proposition for you that I'd like for you to consider. Okay. Now, oxygen, we did Earth Day just a couple of weeks ago, and which is a very important item. But, we live on the Earth, and, oxygen and water are important elements of Earth content. We breathe in, we breathe out. It's been said that we breathe in 20,000 times a day. 20,000 breaths a day. That's about 11,000 liters of oxygen. We breathe in, we breathe out. And the planet Earth provides us with water, fresh water. Now, ultimately, I've heard it said that, the oxygen is a combination of oxygen, nitrogen, and methane gas. And argon gas, a small portion. Argon gas, a small portion. Oxygen, nitrogen, methane gas, and argon gas. Now, of course, we know what oxygen is because we breathe it. And I only take a second because I want us to laugh. Okay, now, and methane gas are decaying things, not to be perturbed about it, but, but also, when you pass gas, that's methane gas. think about what would happen if the 7.6 billion people on the earth did that at the same time. Well, but God in his infinite wisdom has made everything so right, has made everything so right. But and there's always balance, and I love the fact that there's balance. And so I don't know if that made you laugh, but if you don't laugh because of that, just laugh anyway. It's a little silly. So I hope I didn't want to let us move to the next subject matter. Okay, Mr. Ron Cisneros and Mr. Michael Madden, please share with us. Share with us.
Okay, great. Hey, Mike, do you want me to go first or do you want to start?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, hey, thanks for the opportunity again. And it's been a great morning. Well, I am learning just not about cybersecurity, but we even had to self-publish a book. We did the same thing. We went through BookBaby ourselves, and writing the book was a task in itself. But once we finished it and got it to Amazon, Mike and I were kind of struggling. How do we market this book? So as novice, we've done a lot of different things as well. We even thought about Oprah. And my wife actually sent a book to Bill Maher because I'm a fan, and included a book. And I don't have a green screen, but I do have a T-shirt that has untruthful speech on there. So we're doing everything we can to market this book. The concept of the book, Mike and I are not doctors. We don't have our PhD, so we wrote about COVID. And the only way we could probably write about COVID is to write it fictionally. The story takes place in 2019. There's a young man, character by the name of Nick Rago, who decides to take some time off from college and go explore the world, and ends up in Bangladesh to be a teacher's assistant. Once there, he kind of gets caught up in some unsavory people who is trying to steal the COVID vaccine formula here in the States. The back setting is actually in Maine, and I've never been to Maine, so I had to write about Maine. And Bar Harbor was a city, and wrote about Maine and lobster boats, because he does come back and comes to work on a lobster boat. And meanwhile, the formula gets stolen out of this lab.